She didn't enter the industry through a fashion house. She came in through a television screen. While most 90-second supermodels were discovered in Paris cafes or backstage at runway shows, Heidi Klum made her entrance on a grainy German television broadcast, winning a modeling competition that was never meant to create legends. Yet somehow, it did. There she was, blonde, healthy, vibrant, and smiling. A real smile. Not the calculated, distant smirk the fashion world worshipped. Nestled in Western Germany, the town was quiet, practical, and utterly forgettable, more known for its paper mills than polished runways. This was where Heidi Klum was born on the 1st of June, 1973. Her mother, Erna, was a hairdresser. Her father, Günther, worked in cosmetics. Together, they lived a life of no excess and no tragedy, just ordinary rhythms of a working-class family. But Heidi was never ordinary. She was taller than the other girls, more animated. She had a wild kind of energy, restless, expressive, unfiltered. She staged pretend talk shows in her bedroom, choreographed living room fashion shows, and once insisted on being the star of her school art project, posing in full costume while her classmates sketched. There was no hunger for fame, just an instinct for presence. Wherever she went, people noticed, not because she demanded attention, but because she absorbed it. At school, she was both admired and teased. Some teachers found her too loud. Girls called her too confident. Boys didn't know what to make of her. But Heidi didn't shrink. She smiled wider. She loved drawing, dreamed briefly of being a designer, and considered studying fashion, not wearing it. Modeling felt absurd in a town like hers, where dreams were supposed to stay dreams. Still, something lingered, a hum beneath the everyday, as if even Heidi herself knew she didn't belong in a place where people were told to be quiet, to blend in. Her parents encouraged creativity, but also cautioned her to be realistic. Her father once told her, "It's fine to want more, as long as you work for it." She took it to heart. Years later, that simple idea would become her fuel. She didn't know it yet, but this small-town girl who played dress-up on carpet floors would one day walk on the most famous stages in fashion, not because she looked the part, but because she never did. And while she hadn't yet seen it firsthand, the world she would step into, one of beauty, pressure, power, and scrutiny, would be far more ruthless than she imagined. The lights would be dazzling, but they would cast long shadows, the kind found only in the dark side of fashion. It started with a commercial. One evening in 1992, Heidi Klum was sprawled on the couch in her family's living room when an ad flashed across the screen. A nationwide modeling contest, Model 2092, was looking for fresh faces. It promised fame, contracts, and a trip to New York. It sounded like a gimmick. It was a gimmick. But something in her chest pulsed. She applied, almost as a joke. She sent in amateur photos, filled out a form, and thought nothing of it. Weeks passed. Then a letter came. She'd made it to the semifinals. She didn't scream. She didn't celebrate. She packed. The competition was brutal. Over 25,000 girls had applied. One by one, they were eliminated, too short, too shy, too safe. But Heidi stood there, unapologetically herself, smiling, energetic, undeniably present. She didn't have catwalk experience. She didn't carry herself like a model. She just was. She won. Live on national television, wearing a plain black dress and almost no makeup, Heidi Klum was crowned the winner of Model 2092. With that came a $300,000 contract and a plane ticket to New York City. Her father, Günther, recognizing something seismic had shifted, quit his job to become her manager, not to control her, but to protect her. Even then, he sensed what awaited them wasn't a fairy tale, it was a battlefield. When Heidi first landed in Manhattan, she didn't walk into a dream. She walked into silence. Agencies were cold, designers were dismissive. The American fashion world, obsessed with waifs, edge, and mystery, had no space for a bubbly German girl with a toothy grin and a bright attitude. She didn't fit the image of the emerging 90-second supermodels, who floated through fashion weeks like unreachable goddesses. "She's too commercial," one scout said. "She smiles too much," another muttered. It wasn't rejection, it was erasure. Still, Heidi didn't fold. She learned English. She went to castings alone. She waited outside buildings in the freezing cold just to hand out her portfolio. And slowly, quietly, she started booking catalog shoots, lingerie campaigns, background spots in group spreads. Nothing glamorous, nothing grand. But she was moving. One shoot led to another. A photographer remembered her name. A stylist passed her number along. A booking agent gave her one more chance. And then came Sports Illustrated, the iconic swimsuit issue. A single photo on a sunlit beach changed everything. She wasn't just that German girl anymore. She was the woman who refused to give up, and the world was finally taking notice. She wasn't a fluke. She wasn't a trend. She was about to become one of the most unlikely and enduring figures in the world of 90-second supermodels. If you believe resilience is the real runway, don't forget to follow, because this story is only getting started. It didn't happen overnight, but when it came, it hit like a spotlight. In 1997, Heidi Klum graced the cover of Sports Illustrated's swimsuit issue. She wasn't the most daring. She wasn't the edgiest. But her photo, standing on a sunlit beach in a playful bikini, laughing into the wind, felt different, afresh, alive. She didn't smolder. She radiated. America took notice. Soon, Victoria's Secret came calling. They didn't just want her, they wanted her energy. She wasn't a mannequin for desire. She was the fantasy's architect. When she first stepped onto their runway, wings at her back, crowd roaring, Heidi wasn't pretending to be anything. She was simply enjoying it. And everyone felt it. She became a fixture. Year after year, she returned as one of the brand's signature angels. Not just beautiful, but confident, effortless, playful. While many of the era's most prominent faces wore couture-like armor, Heidi wore fashion like skin natural, lived in, hers. Then came Vogue, Elle, Cosmopolitan, Glamour. Her face appeared on newsstands across continents, her laugh echoing across billboards. Commercials, campaigns, endorsements, interviews. The kind of visibility most models only dreamed of, Heidi lived daily. But she wasn't content with being the face. She wanted to own the frame. In 2004, she stepped into television not just as a host, but as a creator. Project Runway wasn't just a platform, it was a revolution. She wasn't there to be admired, she was there to decide. She judged, she led, she inspired. And once again, the world adjusted to her presence. Suddenly, model no longer described her. She was a mogul, an executive, a personality. And yet for some, that was the problem. The fashion elite, the same ones who once rejected her for being too commercial, now criticized her for becoming too powerful. "She's not fashion," they whispered. "She's television." As if walking onto a soundstage somehow erased the runways she'd conquered. But Heidi never chased acceptance. She chased freedom. Freedom to choose her work, to create her own brand, to be more than a face, an empire, instead. Still, the shadows crept in. Fame made her untouchable, but also a target. Rumors started. Headlines sharpened. People didn't just admire Heidi anymore, they scrutinized her, picked at her weight, questioned her marriages, mocked her motherhood, laughed at her choices. Success came at a price, one that wasn't paid in contracts, but in cuts too small to see. Because behind the cameras, the glamour, the applause there, was always something else watching. Something colder. Something unspoken. The dark side of fashion never forgets. There was a reason Heidi Klum never quite fit the industry's favorite narrative. She wasn't mysterious. She wasn't fragile. She didn't play the tortured muse. In a world that praised suffering disguised as elegance, Heidi was loud, joyful, unapologetically present, and that more than her looks was what made her dangerous. Fashion had long rewarded silence. The quieter you were, the more revered. But Heidi wasn't built for quiet. She cracked jokes on camera, She laughed in interviews. She danced backstage in robes and rollers. While other models posed as unreachable fantasies, she reminded people she was real. That didn't sit well with everyone. Fashion critics scoffed. Some called her too commercial. Others accused her of selling out. But what they missed was this. Heidi wasn't trying to join their club. She was building her own. And her choices made that clear. She turned down brands that refused to work with mothers. She walked away from contracts that demanded weight clauses. She refused to bleach her personality just to appeal to high fashion sensibilities. She chose authenticity over acceptance again and again. Even her television career was met with skepticism. When Project Runway premiered, fashion purists rolled their eyes. A model judging designers? They scoffed. But Heidi didn't flinch. She didn't just judge, she defined. The show earned Emmys. It launched careers. And it proved that a model could be more than a muse, she could be a machine of influence. She didn't hide her failures either. Her divorce was public. Her relationships scrutinized. Her body debated endlessly as she aged. In a world obsessed with youth and flawlessness, Heidi aged on her own terms. No dramatic retreat, no apology. That's what set her apart from many of her peers, other legendary 90-second supermodels who disappeared when the industry moved on. Heidi adapted. She evolved. She expanded. Not to stay relevant, but to stay true. And through it all, she never gave the fashion world the one thing it secretly wanted from her: obedience. She once said, "I was never trying to be perfect. I was just trying to be me." In an industry that rewarded submission with silence, that statement was radical. Because the dark side of fashion doesn't just demand beauty, it demands conformity. And conformity was the one thing Heidi Klum would never wear. For years, she had been untouchable, crowned by covers, adored on runways, celebrated on screens. But even legends lose their footing. And for Heidi Klum, the fall didn't come with a crash. It came with a slow, creeping silence. In 2012, her marriage to singer Seal unraveled. To the world, they had been a fairy tale: red carpets, public kisses, vow renewals. But behind closed doors, things had cracked. The divorce was painful, private, until it wasn't. Suddenly, the same tabloids that once praised her family life now tore it apart. They speculated about the nanny, about the bodyguard, about betrayal, about vanity. No one asked if she was hurting. They only asked how quickly she had moved on. The headlines stung, but what hurt more were the whispers. She's not the same. She's fading. She's too much. The kind of cruel dismissal reserved only for women who dare to age under the spotlight. Then came the backlash from fashion itself. Her departure from Project Runway, the show she built, came with little fanfare. Rumors circled. Creative control battles, clashing egos, corporate reshuffling. She didn't confirm. She didn't explain. She simply stepped away. And then Heidi disappeared from the center. No more lingerie launches, fewer Fashion Week appearances, fewer magazine spreads. Her once omnipresent face began to recede. But on Instagram, a different Heidi emerged. Barefaced, laughing with her kids, dancing in her kitchen, Halloween costumes, silly videos, no filters, no pretense, just life. It felt too human for an industry that had once placed her on pedestals. But maybe that was the point. Heidi wasn't falling. She was returning to something quieter, more grounded. While many of her contemporaries faded into curated nostalgia, Heidi let herself be messy, present, real. And in doing so, she reclaimed what the fashion world had tried to steal from her: narrative. But still, the pain lingered. Being a woman in fashion meant that your power had an expiration date. Your body had a timer. Your joy had to be earned, again and again. Even as one of the most successful 90-second supermodels, Heidi had never been exempt from the system's cruelty. That's the truth the runways never show. The shadows behind the lights, the expectations behind the applause. That's the dark side of fashion. It doesn't scream. It waits. And sometimes, it follows you home. She didn't vanish. Heidi Klum never said goodbye. She didn't need a farewell tour or a final runway. She simply evolved slowly, gracefully, and without asking for permission. Her legacy isn't in the number of covers she graced or brands she endorsed. It lives in the space she created for women to be powerful and playful, for models to speak, to lead, to own. She reminded the world that you didn't need to suffer to be beautiful. You could laugh, you could rise, you could age, love, fail, and still be luminous. She wasn't the loudest of the 90-second supermodels, but she might be the one who lasted longest, not because the world gave her room, but because she made room for herself. And when the fashion industry one day rewrites its own history, it will have to make space for the girl who wasn't supposed to make it. The one who smiled when others posed. The one who stayed real when others faded. The one who never stopped walking even when the lights dimmed. If this story moved you, share it, leave a comment, or send it to someone who still believes in authenticity, because sometimes the fiercest revolution starts with nothing more than a smile.